Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hi.
Hello.
Buenas tardes. So, I haven't... there's series. There's a time period where I was just eating up specific series, and I always read all the way through, and then I hit this point where I would diversify my reading, right? And it becomes much harder to keep up with series when you have multiple series that you were chowing down on, right? Like for all this time. So I got behind on the... oh, what is the name? Harry, the wizard. Harry Dresden. I'm way behind. I'm years behind on those. If they're still being produced, I don't even know.
I don't know. I think he stopped, but then he might have started again.
Okay. And then like Kim Harrison and all of these people that I was reading. And so J.D. Robb was one of those that I really stopped. But I can frequently find her hardcovers on deep sale at Barnes & Noble.
Yes.
So every once in a while I still grabbed one and then I was putting it on the TBR shelf and not reading it. So I finally just said, stop, read one of these old books. It's familiar characters. It's going to be, they're thick now.
Yes.
They got thicker and thicker. But, so I'm reading one right now.
Ooh.
And it's a Brotherhood in Death, because they're all in death, right?
I'm going to say I probably read it, but who knows?
Well, so there's somebody who first kills a senator, and they absolutely brutalize the senator first. Like... they come in, they hit him with a zapper right in the nuts. They anally rape him with a hot poker. They make him hurt a lot, and then they kill him slowly. So clearly there's revenge here, yes? Clearly there's revenge of a sexual nature here, yes? So they're thinking then one of his friends, who is a judge, gets killed in exactly the same way. And they find out these guys were in a house with 3 other guys, like all this stuff. So clearly something happened. I haven't gotten to what happened yet. And it's revenge. And I'm having a really hard time being okay with the fact that they're going to catch the women doing this in the end. Because even though I'm usually lawful something. I'm really struggling with how they're going to resolve that in the end to my satisfaction, we'll say, because while I don't wish certain things on people, sometimes people should get to feel what they've done to other people.
Yep.
And so I'm quite enjoying, because I mentioned it a few episodes again. I hit this point where with all the true crime and stuff, it just suddenly became overwhelming to me that like 95% of true crime is men attacking women for one reason or another, often involving some kind of entitlement to that woman, because there's such an ownership over women still in this day and age with a lot of men, not all men, obviously. Hashtag.
Sorry, y'all couldn't see the hand gesture.
It's Jimmy Fallon that did this, and Justin Timberlake. Hashtag this. And they have this conversation. It's all hashtag. It's pretty funny. It's a good skit. But anyway, I'm just like, it just hit me, and I can't handle people right now. And I can't handle politics, and I can't with any of it anymore. And so I was like, so today's story, I'm doing like a evil, terrible, bad woman.
And I'm doing something that is pure mayhem. Pure delightful,
which is good.
Mayhem,
so
because I don't have to do it. So it's very delightful.
Yeah, it's funny that I picked up and I didn't know what the book is about. I was like, it's a J.D. Robb. It's one of the in-depth series. I'm not going to even read the back. I'm sure I did when I bought it.
Yes.
And so I start reading this and I'm like, man, the timing on this. But it might be actually helping in its own way. Like, so you're supposed to be with Eve Dallas, who is the cop, who is on a race to find the killers before they get to the third guy out of these 5, right? And I'm not rooting for her, which is terrible. It makes me a terrible person, and I get that. And I'm actually kind of okay with it, because I'm so tired of nobody paying for it. I'm so tired of women being constantly victimized and the people who do it being let off because nobody wants to ruin their lives. Like Brett, or whatever the fuck his stupid little name was, and the judge who raped the girl behind a dumpster or something, and the judge didn't want to ruin his life because he was a promising young man.
Yeah.
And I can't with it anymore. I've hit this point of overwhelm and just...
Yeah, I get it.
Disgust and dismay because there's really no way to fix it anytime soon.
That's why sometimes I do stuff like the Great Maple Syrup Heist.
Right.
Or the one I'm going to do today. Stuff that is mayhem, that is... now today, there's nothing illegal. Now, obviously, the Great Maple Syrup Heist, it was still a robbery. But sometimes you just have to look for something that you can laugh at. Or something that's not, you just have to look for something different. I've got 2 other pieces I'm working on. One is for me, it's a much bigger piece. I have to read 3 books before I can start to, I'll tell you that off the air. And the other one came to me as this, haha, isn't this funny? And I'm like, well, it is, but I have to do more research. And I'm like, ugh. I want something easy.
It's like my sense of humor has been knocked down a couple notches right now. And I'm like, I totally get why normally I would have laughed at this. But here's why I have a problem. My poor husband is really getting the brunt of that one. Like, he shows it to me. It's funny. And then I'm like, but this is all about this bigger problem. The fact that we can laugh about it is why it's a bigger problem. So I'm just in that place right now. Basically, I'm fighting. I want to fight a whole lot of battles at the same time. And I can't. So my husband had never watched Glow. Did you ever watch Glow? I watched Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling.
I watched a good chunk of the first season.
Okay.
It's like everything else. I start watching it and I like it, and then something shiny shows up on the floor and I forget all about it.
Actually, it was one of the things I kind of binged, and then my husband never watched it, and I was like, it's been a few years. I don't remember anything about it anymore. And I really liked one of the main actresses. And I didn't know who she was at the time. And now I've seen her other stuff. And now I'd like to go back and watch it. Knowing her, kind of. And
the main character or one of the...
She's the... Well, there is a main character. And then there's a blonde.
Her friend.
Yes. Who is also very much a main character.
Yes.
Like, she even has her own storylines out. So they both do. So at this point, they're pretty equal, I guess. But it kind of started out with the brunette more. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was like, I'll watch it with you. So we started watching that, and we're in the, I think we just hit the 3rd season, which is the final season. So, and I realized I hadn't watched it, so I hadn't seen at some point that 3rd season came out. But yeah, that one's been entertaining again.
Oh, good.
I'm trying to find entertaining things.
Why
I'm watching like documentary shows.
I picked up. I think I may have asked you this already. I'm sure you've read it, Stephen King's Insomnia?
Yeah. It's been a while.
Okay. So I read it when it came out, which I was, let's say it was 30 years ago ish. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then I just reread it last week. Mm-hmm. And for anybody who hasn't read Insomnia, it's about the main male character is 70 and the main female character is 68. Let's just say I had an entirely different perspective on this book at the age I am now than I did when I first read it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to me what I remembered and didn't remember about the plot. There was something that I thought was a big piece of it that happens at the end. Also, much like, what was it, Fairy Tale? Mm-hmm. You have all this lead up, and then you have the actual story.
Yeah.
That's just how he does it.
It's so much easier to look at somebody else's writing and see where they need to cut it than your own sometimes, but it still makes me think his editors aren't editing him the way they should be.
There was something of his, I'm trying to remember what it was, and after I read it, that was my impression was, well, nobody edits Stephen King anymore.
Yes.
And I can't remember which book it was.
Oh, I've thought that a few times. I think Under the Dome was a big one for me, and I didn't enjoy that one as much as I could have. And then Fairy Tale really was my reminder of that. But then you had lent me Elevation, which is really probably a novella, and that had I was like, oh, thank goodness, because I love his short stories. I love his short form fiction. Mm-hmm. I love all his stuff, but I really have always been a fan of the shorter form, and he does it so well. And yet, I'm like, that does not correspond to the novel writing. So I feel like when I read The Shining, and I have read it a few times, but it's been a few years again, but I feel like he had that down, and the shit that happened in that everything happened for a reason in it. And that's what I miss in some of the other stuff. A lot of backstory and a lot of, let's go on this completely unnecessary side road because I have something I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it shouldn't probably be in this.
Yep.
He's a little white guy, and he has his stories, he has things he wants to say now, and he's going to say whatever he wants to.
Yep.
But
we're all going to keep buying them.
Yeah.
I will buy everything. The only thing I haven't read, it was so funny, I was just discussing this with Thing 2, was The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. About the girl who gets lost in the woods.
I did read that one.
When that came out, I had 2 young daughters, and I said, fuck that. No, I just said, no, I don't want to. And Nikki was telling me about this. We were discussing it, and she was telling me more about the story than I had known before. And I was like, yeah, I don't feel the need to go back and read that one.
That's the thing. He wrote characters, he was writing these things when he was a parent of kids that age, right? We have, Gage Creed in Pet Sematary that he wrote about. And that one's hard when you go back and read it as a mom.
Who is referenced in Insomnia.
Yeah, it's super pat yourself on the back. And yet I love that when he started tying all of his shit together.
Yes.
I love the nods, and really, because that's a fan thing, right? You're not going to feel like you missed out on something because you're not going to know what it's going to be, a passing thing if you don't know it. But if you know it, then you get that warm, fuzzy feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Like I had one of our mutual friends did an interview for me for my book release, and K.A. Olgren is her author name. Mm-hmm. So you can look her up for mystery. And one of the questions she asked was, do you ever plant things in your stories? Like, like nods to people's secret things people recognize. And I was like, I don't plant things that say like for friends, because that feels icky to me. But I'll have something that I put in it that's just me. And the example I gave was one of my stories was hate mail to a Hemingway story. It was like anti-fan mail.
I know that story.
Yeah. And
I remember reading that story and being like, oh, finally.
There it is. But that was the thing. That wasn't me doing that for friends, but I figured anybody else hated this fucking book as far as story, novella, whatever it is, if it went back, as much as I did, they might recognize that this is a play on that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to say the story, but my story, people would have to figure that out. But it's The Old Man in the Sea. Yep. Because I did a thing for what is it? It was either, I can never remember which is which. I was in both Olympics of the Mind and Odyssey of the Mind. One is the little man Tate, and super smart kids competing. And then one was also meant to be like smart kids, but I mean, anybody could join. So it was competitions where you do, like, one you could choose. And so one of them we had to do something on The Old Man in the Sea. That's what we chose. And so we just killed the fuck out of it. You had to read it so much and talk about it so much and do all this stuff. And I was like, and I didn't even like it in the first place, especially. I don't remember why we chose it. We just didn't but it's stuff like they would build. It was short. Build balsa wood things that had to, you had to build a bridge that it had to hold this much weight. It was stuff like that. There were various things. And so that's the thing we chose. And there was something called Spontaneous that I absolutely loved, which is weird because it's such like an introvert that needs processing time for stuff. This is exactly the opposite of that. And they would bring you into the room, and then you had no idea what they're going to. They would give you some manner of prompt or a prop or something, and then they would say, do this thing with it. So, for example, they would give you a wooden spoon and say, okay, now make up a bunch of things about the wooden spoon, uses for it that aren't cooking. And you would pass it, so you'd all gesture for it if you had thought of something, and it's improv is what it was. Okay. It's not a thing I would have expected me to like, but I enjoyed it. And so we did that stuff. But yeah, The Old Man totally killed it for me. And I was like, I'm writing a story and tell you what this man is like.
What the old man is really like.
That's right. And so that was entertaining. But that was my answer to that. I was like, yeah, I plant things, but I don't plant them. And I don't think Stephen King's, that's a nod to his fans, because he has fans. I'm certainly not there, but yeah.
Well,
It was an interesting question. It's a different question than I've been asked.
Yes, and I think it's easier in long form fiction because you've got so much space where you can, like, I can't say several. I think more than one of his books have referenced Cujo.
Yes.
But it might just be...
It's in fairy tale, too.
Yeah, remember when that dog went fucking insane? Or remember that rabid dog a few years ago? And that's the only thing they say.
Yes, there's a lot of references, like, in that fairy tale, since I read it so recently, the straight up is like, that dog's like Cujo.
Yes.
It's one of the boys references straight up Cujo. Not like this rabid dog. He reached that point where he's like, fuck it, I'm not going to say.
Because everybody knows Cujo.
Yeah. Right. Even because it was a movie, and even if you didn't see the movie or read the book, you still know who Cujo is. It's just, it became part of the zeitgeist,
the lexicon.
Or whatever. Yeah.
I was so disappointed when I saw that movie in the theater.
Oh, I didn't hate the movie.
But I was happy. I was okay with the movie up till the end.
Oh,
because they changed the ending.
They always change his endings.
Because it was such a gut punch in the book, and then they watered it down in the movie.
Yeah,
I know, but
I was weirded out because I saw the movie first and read the book after, and there's a whole side story about a spirit or something in the closet. It was like, I understand why they took that out of the movie. It really didn't fully factor into the book either.
And then there's the cereal. Nope, nothing wrong here.
Yeah.
So that phrase has stuck with me. Because, that's one of the side storylines that sets up the tension between his parents because, what is it? It's the artificial coloring.
Yeah.
Made kids throw up. So the dad in the story has something to do with advertising.
Yeah.
And there's this new cereal and all the kids love it. But the kids start throwing up after eating it. And unfortunately, it's a reaction to the food coloring, but the food coloring is red. So initially, they think the kids are throwing up blood.
Yeah.
Which, that's not good. I have to move.
A whole sidekicker thing there. So, he definitely plans a lot. But I mean, he was like an English lit teacher. Oh yeah, because it's that time.
It's in the upper window, so I'm just going blind, no problem.
He knows all about burying stuff and all the threads and all the themes and all that shit. So he wraps it in. He's good at that shit.
So what you got good this week?
Since we had so many evil men, because we had that one episode, it was just like, it was hard to leave that one without feeling like if you didn't have good men in your life, you would be hating men, and that wasn't intentional at all. Again, we don't talk about what we're doing until we get here this day to record and we figure out what might go with the other one.
Yeah.
But I left that one just like, fuck, so bad. So bad. And so I was like, I need to cover an evil woman. And so I am. And it's not like we haven't. It's just true. It just reached ahead again when my shit is reaching ahead on that. So I'm covering Debora Green. On the night of October 24th, 1995, a family home in an upscale neighborhood in Prairie Village, Kansas, went up in flames. This was like a neighborhood of, doctors' families and lawyers' families and stuff like that. The homeowners were a couple, both of them doctors, and their 3 children, a 13-year-old boy named Timothy, a 10-year-old daughter named Kate, and 6-year-old daughter named Kelly. The oldest and youngest child perished in the fire, as did the family's pet dogs. But there's so much more to this story, which so it feels like I'm burying that. Like, hey, here's the end. Goodbye. What started out being thought of as an unfortunate accident ballooned into an incident that went back at least 6 months before the fire involved far more than just one fire. The couple, Dr. Debora Green, an oncologist and hematologist, and Dr. Michael Farrar, a cardiologist, were in the midst of a divorce. So he hadn't been home that night. He was living in an apartment, and we'll get into that later. A neighbor called him at his apartment to tell him his house was on fire. It's just, that's a phone call to get. Mm-hmm. Your house on fire. I don't know if your family's in there or not. Between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, Farrar was told he was in the police station by that time. He did go to the point of the fire. Was told that 2 of his children had died.
Oh, God.
It wasn't long after that it was revealed accelerants had been used inside the house, so it was arson. Firefighters on the scene stated that Green, that would be Deborah, was completely indifferent and unemotional about the fire as they battled it, that her daughter Kate was the one crying and asking them to save her siblings. The neighbors said Green had run to their house and calmly asked them to call 911 and that her hair had been wet. She said she'd been asleep, but her hair was wet. Neither Farrar nor Green had accelerant on their clothes when tested for it, and actually they never determined what the accelerant was. It was not gasoline. Police, after questioning all 3 remaining family members, became suspicious of Green for the same reasons as the firefighters. She had appeared unconcerned and was even described as bubbly and cheerful. She was waiting to hear if her kids were dead for confirmation. And
God.
She's just chit-chatting away with them, all while waiting to hear for sure her children were dead, right? In fact, she didn't refer to any of her children by name during any of the time during interviews. She called them by their age. She kept talking about her son and her youngest daughter in the past tense. She at one point said, yeah, that used to be my 10-year-old son. That used to be my 10-year-old son.
Oh my God.
That's one of the quotes that the cops were like, what the actual fuck, lady? They had suspicion now, but no proof, and no one wanted to believe a mother would burn her own house down with her kids inside.
Right.
Especially not. This woman was highly intelligent. She had been highly successful. She was basically, when they talked to people from her youth, the one most likely to succeed. Like, she was driven. She was brilliant.
Yes, because we do have a bias in this country that criminals are undereducated and live in poor circumstances and disadvantaged. And
yes. As for Kate, the 10-year-old maintained her mom was scared and worried for her siblings, and she felt her dad was the bad guy in the impending divorce. In speaking to Farrar, history started to make itself known. When they met, Green had already been married once, but they decided they weren't a good match, and they'd split amicably. Farrar and Green married in 1979. He thought she was deeply intelligent, but would later admit her explosive temper was a problem, and she didn't seem to have the ability to cope with things when they went bad. At first, she worked as an ER doctor. And I'm like, really? She doesn't cope with things when they go bad. She was an ER. Okay. She found she wasn't fond of it. She wasn't a fit. No shit. Chronic illness, including a wrist infection that kept returning, migraines and insomnia may have had something to do with it. So she started having these severe chronic illnesses before she even had kids. Yeah, I didn't get that. But if you're a doctor, a wrist infection is probably pretty big deal. Well, I just couldn't find anything on what the fuck that even meant. How do you get a wrist infection?
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay, still. You have the same
because
questions
I did wonder. Yeah, I was like, okay. In order to switch specialties, she had to go do a second residency and fellowship stuff. She had to kind of start over because she was switching to oncology, which is dealing with cancer.
That's a big change.
So she did the right thing. She wasn't just like, I'm just going to slide on over here and move into this and know jack shit about it. So Farrar got a residency at a hospital in Cincinnati. So they moved there, and then she started her residency there. She was doing a fellowship at the University of Cincinnati when they had their son Timothy in 1982. Eventually, then they moved to Kansas City, Missouri. They followed jobs and, whatnot. Green would bounce back and forth between her work and maternity leave for the next 2 births. Having finished her fellowship, then opened a private practice. And that private practice was thriving at first. She did very well in private practice in oncology. But about 4 years after their 3rd child was born, her chronic pain had become such a problem that her practice was going under. Possibly also because of her having had to shut it down repeatedly for maternity leaves. And I'm sure, here's the thing. She's the bad guy in this, straight up. I feel like her husband turned a blind eye to an awful lot of things and that he was a bit of a old-fashioned misogynist. She still had to do the housekeeping and take care of the kids. So I am certain, even though...
She was she must have been a solo practitioner.
Yes.
It sounds like, because...
She was also ahead of him in medicine. I don't know if he was younger than her or what, but she was more advanced than he was. And she, in fact, had multiple specialties, and he was still finally just a cardiologist.
Just a cardiologist.
Yeah, compared to her. I did leave this with a bit of a problem with him, but... So I first heard about this case on Forensic Files. And I will say this really pointed out to me how simplified things were on Forensic Files, because there were a lot of eye-opening things I found after listening to that episode. And of course, Forensic Files is going to be focused on the forensics of it. So they're really just aiming the story for that. They left out a lot. But they were also very leaned in one direction, right? And so I don't know if they purposely left stuff out because of their lean for example.
Ah.
So I feel like that'll become clearer later. Anyway, I suspect she was having to modify her hours around parenting more than he was.
It sounds like.
It's just what I will say after researching in different things. With her qualifications, she was able to get jobs to do from home related to medical stuff like processing Medicaid requests and doing peer reviews and stuff like this.
Okay.
So that's what she was doing as an also stay-at-home mom. But that also tells me she was still fucking working. She was just working from home. Being a doctor also meant she could self-prescribe narcotics and sedatives, and she started abusing them. The kids had a lot of after-school activities. Farrar worked heavy hours, so Green did most of the chauffeuring around, responsible for keeping the house up. I say this because one of Farrar's complaints, and the reason he felt their marriage was falling apart partially, she just wasn't a good housekeeper. She just didn't keep the house well enough. See, when I started having a problem with him, there was very obvious bias, and I don't feel this was a fair marriage. And I feel, because I've been in this position, she gave up everything that was her then to stay home. Well, and she had chronic illness on top of that.
If you don't think the house is clean enough, pick up a fucking broom.
Yeah. So.
Just saying.
And none of this was like, nobody addressed this.
Okay.
In everything, he is absolutely the good guy. He did nothing wrong. And I'm looking at this and I'm reading it and I'm seeing so much underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
He straight up complained about her housekeeping and the disorganization of the house. And I'm like, motherfucker, she was working too.
Yeah.
And she had chronic. Does anybody understand what that's?
No.
No, they don't. It just have one fucking migraine and tell me how you function. One fucking migraine. Now have them all the time. Tell me how well you function with a job and kids and keeping the house. Tell me how that goes for you. And then fuck yourself.
And dogs.
Yeah.
Because that adds a layer.
2 dogs. Yeah. And I don't know what kind of dogs. They never said. They kind of skirted over the dogs because they didn't want to talk about them being in the fire, I think. In addition, Farrar said when she was mad at him, she would explode, sometimes violently. Could be public. It could be private. She would harm herself at times.
Oh.
So, again, this was 2 fucking doctors, and at no point did anybody address her mental illness until it was too late.
Yeah.
She also complained to their kids about him, which is very problematic. I've been there too, on the kid side of that. But this is him saying it. It's him saying it. She complained about the kids and the kids turned on him. So whenever they'd have an issue, she was telling, your dad is the bad guy. So you know what? From the sound of it, from hearing the girl afterwards, that's certainly either he really was the bad guy in it or they really had been turned on him because the daughter really wasn't fond of her father at this point and blamed him for stuff.
And if she's the one spending the time with the children.
Yes, and he even admitted he worked longer hours because he was afraid of getting in fights with his wife and because his 13-year-old son started defying him and sticking up for their mother.
Ooh.
And so he admitted, I just kept working longer and longer and longer hours so that I wouldn't have to deal with the kids or her. And I'm like, well, that wasn't the fucking answer. And again, nobody addressed that that's problematic.
Yeah. But stick your head in the sand. That'll help.
And he did admit on the stand, and later he said, I was part of why the marriage was bad. He did say that. I'm going to say that now because I'm so pissed off at this dude that I am now tilting it. But since so much this information is coming directly from him, it's also leaned, right?
Yes.
And in it, he's the good guy. But he basically said there was no love in the marriage from the beginning. He said we never told each other we loved each other or anything like that, not even in the beginning. And I'm like, why did you guys get married and procreate? I don't understand why you thought, did you keep having kids because you thought it would make it better? They don't.
No,
don't ever make it better.
Does.
It's just a new complication, and then you ruin their lives. So, yeah. And I feel he overlooked mental health issues that needed help earlier. And it's sometimes a lot harder to see them in yourself than in another individual.
Yes.
And he was so absent that he didn't see them. I mean, he complained about her short temper, but did he ever consider there was a mental health reason for that? He did not.
Yeah. So
he asked for a divorce in 1994, and it didn't go well. She blew up. She had kind of suspected him of cheating because of all the hours away. Mm-hmm. But she hadn't expected him to ask for the divorce. I guess that came as a complete shock to her because, again, if it wasn't this big love marriage, maybe she just figured we just keep doing this. I don't know.
No.
They were so fucked up. He ended up moving out into an apartment then after this whole blow up. But he still kind of came around and he took the kids to their activities. There were 3 and they were all in activities. So they split them however they needed to. That's fair enough, And the night of the fire, he had actually done that. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But at one point, months later, they decided to try to work it out and oddly decided, stupid. They're doctors, they're smart in one way.
But they're people.
Decided that the answer to their marital problem, let's try and work it out. I'm going to try and be more present, he said. I'm going to try to work less hours. So he did get there. And she said, I will try and be better at home. I'm going to get off these substances. I will be a better housekeeper. I will be a better cook, she said. So apparently he bitched about that too. And they said, if we get a larger house, this disorganization and unkemptness will change. And I'm like, no, you guys, that just gives you more space to fill in into bigger mess.
I can't help thinking they are 2 doctors. They should have been able to afford housekeeping.
Right?
And maybe a cook.
I feel like they had to at some point because she had a private practice and they would have been too little. They would have had to be in something. And they did have a nanny at one point because it came up on the stand that they had a nanny. But when she wasn't working anymore, like in the practice, and she was just doing this other stuff, she was probably making nominal amounts, right? And so then she was home and there was probably the argument, if you're home, you don't need a nanny. And so on, except she's home because she's ill. Whatever. So frustrating, this story to me.
Yeah.
None of this was in the forensic files. But it's not going to make the house cleaner. It's going to make the house hard to clean. There's more to clean. They had 3 kids and they moved into a 6-bedroom. Okay.
Did the dogs get their own bedroom?
Right? I don't know. They surely did. They bid on a Prairie Village house, and that's, of course, the house that would burn down. Then they backed out. And there's kind of like this panic over, our marriage isn't great, our finances are worrisome. No shit. And your finances aren't great because you went from a 2 income to a mostly 1 income, it sounds like. And you're moving into an unnecessarily large house in an unnecessarily nice neighborhood because you have to be with other doctors and lawyers, I guess. And go on a cruise. And then get lost on an island. Then their house, then their house in Missouri burned down. So this is not the Prairie Village house that I talked about burning down at the beginning. They backed out of this. Then their house burned down. And they were living in like Kansas City, Missouri. So, because it feels like when you live in that area, you're either or. You're like, I'm in both states. Because they kind of go back and forth. And it was found to be an electrical short. So they did get an insurance payout and all of that. It was not found to be arson. There was no sign of it. So I don't think that
it was an inspiration.
Precisely. I think it was, this could happen, right? Like, okay. So they move into this bigger house and then things don't work out. But they plan a trip to Peru through the kids' private school. That's what this, a bunch of families went to Peru.
And that's why they don't have any money if they have 3 kids in private school.
For fuck's sake, right? Just be realistic. Anyway, Farrar decided rich people and their problems. Farrar decided to wait until after the trip to bring up divorce again, but he had at that point decided, okay, we tried it. It's not working. But I'm like, but you just buried yourselves in debt. How are you going to split up now? God, fuck. Stop. But on the trip, he met another woman. Married woman. She was an RN. Her husband was an anesthesiologist because, again, their kids went to school together. They were all on the school trip. Well, they claim not to have started the affair on the trip. Farrar did say they started an affair when they got home. Interestingly, on the trip, he got incredibly sick with vomiting and diarrhea and all this.
Eye drops.
No. No. Oh, wait. It continued after they got home, and he actually ended up hospitalized multiple times. He almost died. There was sepsis involved with damage from streptococcus leaking out through the thin into like the rest of the body because of the damage from this. So we're not just, I just want to make it clear, we're not just talking vomiting and diarrhea. We're talking dire.
Okay.
So he almost died that first time. He gets home because he's feeling better. He instantly is sick again. He goes back in. He gets out better. He gets sick again. He goes back in. So this is happening. And they cannot fucking figure it out. They decide it must be something he caught in Peru. They're like, what is this exotic disease you're suffering from? They narrowed it down to some things. They even went to maybe it's gluten. That was one of the things they were considering.
It's always gluten.
But they're not figuring it out. They're just not getting anywhere. And Farrar's girlfriend says, I think your wife's poisoning you. And he goes, no, she's not.
Surprise!
Woo! Even though he'd asked for a divorce, he had decided to stay in the house this time. And she was drinking heavily, and he said he stayed there because she was watching the kids during all this. I'm like, heaven forbid you move out and take the kids. But
or stay in the house. Give her the option to have a small apartment.
Well, he did that. Right. So anyway, while drunk, she made threats against his girlfriend, and she talked about suicide and all of that sort of thing. He told his girlfriend there was no way. No. Green wouldn't poison me. But then Green's acting out, and he decides to look around. So he goes through her purse, and in that purse, he found a bag of castor bean seeds. A label on it said, poisonous if consumed. Also in her purse, there were a note signed anonymous, addressed to him and telling him not to divorce his wife. I wish they'd had that. I want to read that note. And empty vials labeled potassium chloride. Castor bean seeds are used to make ricin.
Yes.
Potassium chloride is necessary in the human body, but too much causes something called hyperkalemia, where, here's the short version, it disrupts cell signaling and it can cause the heart to stop.
Yeah.
So he is being dosed with both of these things, it sounds like. He confronted her about the castor bean seeds, and she said she planned to plant them, but here's the thing. Green didn't garden. They didn't have a garden. Plant them where?
Because I carry my gardening supplies in my purse.
And really, if you're going to plant one thing, is it going to be castor beans?
It's going to be lettuce, because it's easy.
Right. So he kept pushing. And finally, she said she was going to use them to commit suicide. And so here he's like, I believe it, because she's threatened suicide. She's done self-harm.
Yeah.
Then suicide. So he did actually believe that. And she continued drinking. And she had been doing that earlier in the day, but he confronted her, and now she's really drinking because they've had an altercation now. Her behavior escalated to the point where Farrar actually had to call the police, and he asked them to come take her to a psychiatric hospital. And I'm like, there were steps you could have taken before that, but okay. Way earlier in all this. Mm-hmm. They showed up and they talked to him and they talked to the kids. Well, the kids were upset. They had been witnessing a lot of this. She was acting oddly, they said. She argued to them that she wasn't suicidal. She was polite to them, but she said she wasn't suicidal. Nothing happened. And then Farrar goes into the room and he brings the shit that he'd found in her purse and hidden. He hid it after that because he waited a full day to confront her about it. But he hid them so she wouldn't have them. And he shows them to the police, and they're like, okay, we'll take her. And so they take her to a local ER, because that's a lot of times what they do for something like this, and then they'll do the next steps from there. The doctor actually talked to her for a while, felt she was acting normal for a woman going through a nasty divorce. And her husband had said he was cheating, and he said he was with this person. And it sounded almost like they were like going to release her, and then Farrar showed up. And she lost her shit. She spit on him, and Farrar, and made a statement that he'd get the kids over our dead bodies. Didn't say over their dead bodies, but at that point it was over our dead bodies. And that's when the doctor said, tell you what, I think that it would be a good idea for you to voluntarily commit yourself. I don't want to do it involuntarily, but come in here. Let's have some hospital time. Let's get you okay. Let's do that. And she said, okay. And then she snuck out the moment she was alone. And she tried to walk home. They found her just walking down the street. And so they bring her back and she agrees again and she stays. Voluntary committal. And this was September. And then, because the fire was what, in October? Yep. This is September when this happened. They diagnosed her with bipolar depression, and they put her on 3 different drugs, because that's what they do. They don't actually try to... Here's some drugs. Clonazepam, a tranquilizer that treats anxiety. Prozac, an antidepressant. And Tranxene, a benzodiazepine used as a sedative. Like, this sounds good to me right now. I would love this cocktail right now. Except I can't take mine off 3 drugs, because they do very bad things. Then they sent her home. Here's a drug cocktail. Go home. Everything's magically better now because you're on drugs.
Oh, for a while. What year was this?
1995.
For a while, Prozac, it was like
my mom was put on it for bipolar too. Yeah.
If you blinked, they would give you Prozac. They tried to give me Prozac for postpartum depression.
Yep. They did that for one of my friends, and she suddenly went from a saint who had, seriously, all the patients in the world, and she was a single mom. She had more patients than I did, to wailing on her child. And she realized what she was doing and went off it.
I said, can I take this if I'm breastfeeding? They're like, sure.
Of course.
I got it and looked it up and went, fuck no.
No. Yeah.
No.
They don't give a shit.
No. They didn't even see me. They prescribed it over the phone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nope. Irresponsible.
I thought they were going to tell me to take vitamin B, or maybe they were going to say you need a laxative or more exercise. That's what I expected when I called my doctor, and they, sounds like postpartum depression. Hold on, we'll send in a script for. But to
put somebody on this many drugs, this is such a drug cocktail, and to send her home was irresponsible.
I totally agree.
And again, she's a terrible person. I'm not going back on that. But there's so much here that wasn't mentioned in the crime shows.
Of course.
I found. So this was about a month. She was released and sent home about a month before the fire, right? Burned down the new house. This time, Farrar left the house for as soon as she was back in, he went back to the apartment. And he said he did so for his personal safety. Because while she was in the hospital, he researched the things she found in the purse to see how those could be used.
Okay.
And he realized that was actually the moment he realized she had been poisoning him. When he did that research. But I'm like, okay, you're worried for yourself, so you left your kids with her.
Yeah. That was what when you said he went back to his apartment for his own safety, didn't give a flying fuck about his children's safety.
So you see why I feel like he contributed to this?
Yes.
Just keep looking the other way, bud. Just keep taking care of yourself. Just take care of yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. But I will say, he truly, in the interviews afterward, it never crossed his mind she would harm the children. He thought she would come after him or his girlfriend. He never thought she would hurt the children. So there's that. And again, I'm putting that there because I understand I'm biased right now. But I wasn't. I was biased in his favor when I started doing the research. And there was it's emotional abuse, what she was doing, telling all their problems to the kids.
Yes.
And turning them against very much so. I believe that was, again, that wasn't said and stuff. I believe that is a form of emotional abuse. But she never laid a hand on the kids. She never beat the kids. This is not a thing that she was doing. This is not a thing anybody said she was doing. On the night of the fire, Farrar took Tim and Kelly to hockey, while Green took Katie to dance. He dropped them off at home just before. It was like 8:45-ish, and then he went out to dinner with his girlfriend. Before he went to bed, apparently, there were a bunch of phone calls between he and Green. She was very drunk, and he finally said, I know you tried to poison. This is the first he actually said that to her. I know you tried to poison me. If I think the kids are in danger, I am calling social services on you. You need to get your shit together, or social services is getting involved. Very brave across the phone when you're not there with your children to tell her that now that you're doing this. So then he went to bed. That's the thing some people can do after altercations like that. Yeah. I can't. Waking up then when the neighbor called him and said, hey, your house is on fire. So that's the order. It went very quickly that night. Basically, it escalated very fast. And during the investigation, he officially filed for divorce. They had talked about it. He said he wanted to, but since they were fighting, he didn't file, I guess. There's no explanation for why, but immediately after the fire, that's when he filed the paperwork. And the courts gave Katie to his parent. He filed for custody of Katie, but she hated him so much and blamed him for what was wrong with their mom, for upsetting her mom, for leaving them. And everything was his fault, according to her. So that's why I do think probably that the mother was she was 10.
Okay.
So I do think that's true, that she was doing that thing they do during divorce, right? Your dad did this. Your dad's leaving us.
Yep.
I do believe that. When police questioned Green, she claimed the smoke alarms had gone off when she was in bed, asleep or whatever. Smoke alarms went off. She thought the dogs had set it off and it was a false alarm. Because they maybe had a house alarm as well. I don't know. Then she tried to turn off the house alarm and didn't turn off because it wasn't the house alarm.
I was like, were the dogs smoking?
Yes.
Playing with
You know what? She wasn't paying attention to them either, so they were smoking. They got in with a bad crowd. The Rottweilers got him into it. So she said she opened the door and there was smoke outside. So she shut her door. She was never anywhere near the fire. She escaped out onto a porch that was adjacent. The master was the main floor. Everything else was second floor for the bedrooms. And she was outside. Timothy called out to her. And she said, stay in the house and wait for the firefighters to save you, is what she told her son. Which tells...
I just can't even comprehend leaving the house while my children are still
absolutely
in it.
No effort. And what I read, there was smoke outside her door, not leaping flames.
Right.
And she did not. Right. In my opinion, she intentionally killed her kids.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that because she's going to. It's going to be claimed later.
I would not leave a cat in the house.
Right.
Much less my children.
Right. Absolutely. I'm with you. So intentional.
I'm sure everyone is.
Because he would have left. He was 13 years old and she said, no, stay there until the firefighters can get to you, because he was on the second floor. I think it was probably straight on that side.
Right.
Then she went to the neighbors. Of course, they were arriving here with the wet hair that she didn't figure they'd notice. She didn't say, nope, she had been fast asleep. When she got back to the house, she found Katie. And there was like an eave or whatever under Katie's side, because Katie's bedroom was on the other side. So she climbed out her window and was stuck there. And so Green had her jump down and said, I'll catch you. And Katie said, when she was being interviewed, well, she didn't catch me, but I was okay. So anyway, that's why Katie lived.
Okay.
They were all meant to die.
Oh my God.
Green lapsed into a troubled, confused state after this, where she had trouble engaging with the world around her. She kept asking if her kid, or where are my kids? Like, are my kids? So again, there was something happening there. She lost her shit afterwards, but when they talked to her immediately afterwards, she was totally numb. So now we've come full circle, back to where I started, right? To the investigation. Investigators had no doubt it was arson. Not only was there a clear trail of accelerant, a ton in the living room, then a trail leading to the doorway of the master bedroom. So she walked along and she poured that shit, and then they never found the accelerant. So whatever she did with that, right? Like, I don't, what the fuck? They said it had to have been like 10 gallons is what the...
Oh.
Yes. I'm like, what? Unless that was a misspeaking on somebody's part.
That seems like a lot of anything
Doesn't it?
to have.
They were like 8 to 10 gallons. And I'm like, wow, what? What?
Because I'm
thinking one big bucket of something.
Because I'm thinking there's tons of stuff in everybody's house that's flammable.
Yes. But that much?
No.
A robe in the master bedroom on the floor, that was kind of lying there, appeared to have the accelerant on it. And there was evidence that 2 small fires had been started in the basement with the same one. They thought it was a test. Will this light on fire? Well, then they were put out. Those were earlier. By the time they called her back in, Green's hair had been cut. She's got a significant haircut. Her hair, there's pictures. Her hair's like shoulder length.
Mm-hmm.
And then her hair is cropped like to above her ears.
Why?
Well, there was still little bits of evidence that her hair had been singed. She said she never came into contact with the fire.
So
okay. And why was her hair wet when she got there? Because her fucking hair caught on fire. That's why. Because she lit a fire. She claimed she never came into contact with it. She also said she'd closed the bedroom door, but the evidence showed the door was wide open. She said smoke, closed the door,
and went out the window.
Nope, she left it open. When they looked into the castor bean seeds, they found the store where she'd bought them, and the clerk was able to identify her tentatively, because the clerk described, they said, okay, that sounds like her, let's do a lineup, and said, I think it's that one, but they weren't like 100% firm.
Right.
Police arrested Green near the end of November in a theater where Kate was rehearsing for the Nutcracker Ballet. I think that's in poor taste for Kate. And pressed charges for aggravated arson, first-degree murder, 2 charges, and attempted first-degree murder, also 2 charges, because one was for the ricin poisoning, one was for Katie.
Right.
Because they fully believed Katie was supposed to die, but she climbed out that window onto that eve. The others couldn't get out. But the 6-year-old the 6-year-old was in her bed. So they probably...
Smoke inhalation.
She might not even woken up. Timothy was awake, but they felt it was smoke inhalation for him too. So at least, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess that's better than it could have been. Farrar suffered an aneurysm in November 1995, likely due to the ricin poisoning. He had to have surgery to treat it. Then in December, he had to have another surgery for an abscess in his brain, also due to the ricin poisoning they felt. Fearing he would die during the surgery, prosecutors actually pre-recorded his testimony, just in case you die.
Wow.
But he did end up being able to show up to court. And that is where he said, I'm part of why the marriage was bad too. The marriage was bad. We shouldn't have been married. Neither of us were doing the right shit. So he did take that. With the evidence of arson, ricin antibodies showing up in Farrar's blood. So he did, a ton of them. They said it showed he'd been being poisoned over time. Proven falsehoods told by Green, her wet burned hair, and her escalating behavior over the previous year. The case against Green was strong. However, this bitch, she blamed her dead son. She said he poisoned his father because he cooked a lot of the dinners and he set the fire. Timothy had, in fact, been caught burning a neighbor's yard once, years before, and both friends and past nanny stated he'd been fascinated with fire. And I ask you, what boy isn't have some sort of fascination?
What kid
does that? Yeah. Right. His nanny, I remember taking some ashes to the woods. That could have been a good thing I lived in Maryland and not Colorado then. His nanny even saying he talked about wanting his dad dead at some point and wanting to burn down the house, though she said it had been years before and she had never told his parents he said this. And I'm like, why? These kids had to deal with all the shit these two did to each other. And her craziness. Things went back and forth. It was all very complicated, and I'm not going to go over it. With Green refusing to admit guilt, still pointing the finger at her dead child. Jesus. But because they had such a preponderance of this is the second story like this, and it pisses me off to blame your child for this. You killed your child, and you're going to blame them?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I haven't covered that other story yet, but I'm going to in the future. Pisses me off. All right. Because there was such a preponderance of evidence and Green feared the death sentence, she did place an Alford plea, then the no contest. I admit there's enough evidence that I could possibly be convicted. Right. I'm not saying I'm guilty, but I'm going to go ahead and take what you want to give me. Let's do a deal. She all but admitted to starting the fire, actually, but not to wanting her kids dead. At no point has she admitted she intended for her kids to die. She clearly did.
Mm-hmm.
At that point. I should point out here, and it does come up, she did use this as one of her arguments, and it failed. She had just been put on a drug cocktail without supervision a month before, too. That can have numbing effects, that can cause suicidal thoughts, that there's so many side effects that could come from something like that. It could have been, she may have never considered killing her kids before. At no point did he say that she threatened the kids. Even that big threat in front of the doctor was over our dead bodies, not over theirs. So this could have helped lead to that. So, Debora Green got 2 40-year sentences to be served concurrently. She's up for parole for the first time in November 2035.
Wow.
That'll be the first, and she'll be in her 80s. Her story has gone back and forth. She has written letters to both Kate and Farrar. She has accused Farrar's girlfriend of starting the fire. She continues to say her son poisoned his father. She had the shit on her. She was the doctor. She was the one who bought them. Clearly the boy did not, and she needs to fuck right off about that and quit blaming her dead child. She has claimed the alcohol made it so she couldn't have started the fire. No way. She was too drunk and messed up from the drugs and too numb and too this, that there's no way she could have started the fire. And then she's kind of said, okay, I set the fire. But she goes back and forth, which is a sign of lying. Various mental health experts have thrown around the possibility of her having schizoid personality disorder, bipolar, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and sociopathy or psychopathy. None of these are official diagnoses other than the bipolar. And one of the experts who interviewed her for court said she was not sociopathic. That seems to hold. Everybody who talked about her parenting outside the home said she supported the kids and their stuff. They did not have, and Kate has stuck by her. So that's out there. Green's lawyer suggested to police at the beginning of the investigation that they should investigate the death of Farrar's girlfriend's husband, which didn't come up anywhere else. And I was like, pardon? This was in a news article about it, which occurred right after she asked for divorce. So it sounds like both of them got into that, and then they said, all right, and they started to try to do the right thing, right, and asked for the divorce. It was found initially to be suicide, and they determined that was still it after
Okay.
they suggested, because that was Green's lawyers. That was her lawyers.
Of
So
course.
probably the implication was that they had offed the husband.
Right. So, and that, as opposed to last week, is a defense attorney doing their fucking job.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they did. I will say that I think that her defense tried to cover everything
Right.
it possibly could have been. Anything having to do with mental health is hit or miss. With, you don't know how, yeah. So anyway, that didn't change. And that's really last update I had. I didn't see an update on what Kate is doing other than that at the time, she was given to the father's parents, not to the father, because of her problems with him. And I don't know if I finished that sentence when I was talking about it because I got distracted. And so I do not know if he eventually got that custody back or if she remained with it. I do not know. And I do not know what she says. She's made no statements recently. Debora Green will not talk about a lot of it. That's why all this information is from Farrar, except for her initial testimonies when she was being investigated. And then in court, she will not grant interviews about it. So everything has to be taken with a grain of salt because it's the dude saying it. And again, while I do think he is admitted to part of his wrongdoing, I don't think he sees part of where he failed in this. Also, I'm sure he has lots of guilt over it. I'm sure he sees some of the places. I just think that things were overlooked till far too late.
Wow.
My opinion. My sources were Wikipedia, the New York Times, and then AP News articles on it, and some local, like, Kansas stations and stuff like that.
Well, I'm going in a completely different direction.
Do it.
For everybody who's just like, oh my God, I can't take it anymore. Hold on. So once upon a podcast, some of you will remember, I talked about the year the Olympic marathon was so incredibly fucked up that the organizers almost dropped it from the Olympics altogether.
Yes.
Okay. That's my way of saying that the topic of running has already been broached here. So I'm going to talk about it again. Not that same thing, but the topic of running. Which is hilarious because I'm such a sloth. Also, after doing the piece on the girl who was sex trafficked, I just needed a break.
Yeah.
So it was really funny because I sat down at my computer, because I'm sure you do this too. You keep a file of things that catch your eye. I'll come back to that later.
And then I always end up picking new things. Almost always.
So I sit down and I'm going to look at my list of stuff. And first I go and check Facebook, as one does. That's how we all procrastinate, right? You go look. So what do I see on Facebook? My cousin Hal has posted about this year's Barkley Marathon. He's an inspiration, I'm telling you. So this one, and I wrote down, unless you have a thing about briars, this one doesn't require a trigger warning, like some of our past ones probably should have had. So, so he posted about this year's Barkley Marathon, and then said, if you haven't seen the documentary, you should. It wasn't to me; it was a general post on his Facebook page. So I'm like, what the fuck is the Barkley Marathon? I'm thinking at this point it has something to do with dogs. It does not. I love a good pun. I'm for it, but no. So it's a delightful hot mess. I apologize to my husband because he heard me talk about this for an entire day. I would come downstairs and go, oh my God, not only this, but this. So in 1977, James Earl Ray, who assassinated Martin Luther King Jr., escaped from Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Petros, I think that's how it's pronounced, Petros, Tennessee. So that's in the eastern part of the state. It's about 40 miles west of Knoxville. So it's big news. I mean, this was big news all over, but it was especially big news in Tennessee. So James Earl Ray was out of prison for about 54 hours before he was caught. And when he was caught, he was only about 10 miles from the prison. The numbers I saw varied from 8 to 12, so I'm going with 10. It's right there in the middle. Gary, Lazarus Lake, Cantrell, and Carl Raw Dog Hen were buddies, and they heard... Yeah.
What names?
I know. They heard about the escape. Lazarus, who goes by Laz. Everybody calls him Laz. Calls himself Laz. While they're talking, he says, I probably could have run 100 miles in that amount of time. I'm telling you, that is the genesis for this race. So I'm not saying that any substances, legal or illegal, were involved, but that was where this grueling, ball-busting race came from. This race was run for something like 10 years before anybody finished it.
Wow.
Yeah. In the early years, the course was about 55 miles long, and Frozen Ed Furtaw was the first person to finish it in 1988 with a time of a little over 32 hours. That's 32 hours of running up and down hills. So in 1989, the course was extended to 100 miles. 1989, it took 6 years until 1995 for the first person to actually finish it.
I'm trying to determine how many miles. So there's a contingent every year. There's contingent of the Cherokee that do the Trail of Tears.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a distance.
Yeah.
I believe they do it on bikes.
But
I'm like, just wow, is what I'm saying.
And these people
considering what that is based on.
Yes, these people are doing it to themselves.
Yeah.
They are of their own free will. It's just the weirdest fucking thing. It's not the fact that it's 100 miles. I mean, that is, I couldn't run 100 miles.
Fuck no.
You could stand behind me with a sharp stick. I could not do it.
I could walk 10 as long as I didn't sit down at any point during that. Like, I'd have to keep going because once I sat down, I wouldn't move.
So the moving force behind the race is Lazarus. So here's one of the things he's a runner. He's a longtime runner. He has a paper map of Tennessee that he keeps at his house. And it's got to be 10 or 12 feet long, and however high that makes it, where he has marked all the roads in Tennessee that he's run. He marks them in orange marker. It's just, it's a runner thing. He was one of the original ultra runners, although, given his cigarette habit, you wouldn't think that at first. His current cigarette habit. And you know what? Remember that, because the cigarettes are going to come back around. So the race is held every year, usually in March, sometimes very early April, in Frozen Head State Park, which either the Brushy Mountain Prison is either in or abuts Frozen Head State Park. I love the name of this park. There's a big yellow gate, and that's the starting point. And when you finish, you have to come up and touch the gate. So the weather can be anything from cold and snowy to hot to rainy to foggy. The setup is that each runner completes the 20-mile course 5 times.
Oh.
So they do 2 of them clockwise, 2 of them counterclockwise, and then the 5th loop varies. So whoever starts the 5th loop first, they can pick, do you want to do it clockwise or counterclockwise? And then they alternate the people. Some years nobody makes it to the 5th loop, so it's a moot point. But they have rules. They have a structure for this. Runners who have competed, however, will tell you that the course changes every year. And it does. It's always in this park, but it changes every year. And each loop is more like 26 miles, which means they're running 130 miles instead of 100.
And this is all in one day?
Oh, no. There's a 60-hour limit. You have 2.5 days to run this, to complete it. And the clockwise, counterclockwise thing is to make sure that they run each direction in the daylight and at night. And and as I already said, whoever starts the 5th loop gets to decide which direction they want to run in. Completing 3 of the 20-mile loops is referred to as the fun run. It's not my definition of fun.
No.
And for some runners, for some of them, that's their goal. I mean, they start out, everybody's goal is to do 5, but some of them are like, I just want to finish the 3 and I'm good. So every year, this is the mind-blowing thing, hundreds of runners from around the world apply to run in this race, but only 40 are accepted. The application fee is $1.60. Lazarus calls it his retirement planning. That $1.60. Huh. So part of the application is a test, followed by an essay on why this person should be allowed to run the race. I happen to have the questions from this year's test. What will be the 119th element on the periodic table? Explain the cause of the Great Unconformity. Write the Gettysburg Address in Save. What even number is not the result of two prime numbers? And who built the Khat Shabib? I can only tell you what one of those questions even means.
Right.
Maybe two.
What does that have to do with running?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Does Laz run the race?
No. Oh, he's 70 now, or he's almost 70.
Did he ever?
He's run, I don't know if he's ever run this one. He sets it up. None of this is advertised or easily accessible to the public. It's partly you have to know somebody.
Yeah.
And if you're supposed to be here, you'll figure it out. So everyone who gets accepted to the rate to run receives a letter of condolence. Just like, okay. Then there's the entrance fee. So once you're chosen, the first year you run, when you're a virgin, you have to bring a license plate from your home state or country. And he has drilled these and strung them together. So they're like blankets. I mean, it's only like one license plate wide, but maybe it's like 6 or 8 long. And he hangs them up at the camp every year. Then the rest of the time, it depends on what he needs. One year it was white shirts. One year it was socks. I did watch the documentary. The year of the documentary, everybody had to bring flannel shirts for it in his size. He's like, I'm good till I die now.
Right? I don't have many needs.
If you're one of the few who has finished the race and you return to do it again, your entrance fee is a pack of Camel cigarettes. So then there are the bib numbers. So, everybody who competes in a race gets a little white piece of paper with their number on it. In this race, whoever they expect to drop out first without even completing the first loop is given number 1. They call him the sacrifice. The human sacrifice. There's a guy who's famous, and they had him in the documentary. He dropped out, I think it was less than 2 miles into the race, and it took him 36 hours to get back to camp. He's like, I have the slowest time of anybody who's ever competed. This is named, and I didn't write the name yet, this is named after his friend whose last name is Barkley, who has unfortunately, since the, I want to say he passed in 2019, but they were like, why is the race named after you? And the guy just shrugs. He goes, oh, fuck if I know. So then there's the bib numbers. You get a different bib number on each loop.
Oh.
Because along the route are hidden a number of books. It's between 9 and 14 books. It was 11 the year of the documentary. And to prove that you ran the correct route, you have to rip out the page of the book that corresponds to your bib number and turn it in at the end of the loop. So they only give out odd numbers. So your first loop, your number might be 37, and the next time it might be 111. Right. So you're ripping out different pages.
Fascinating.
And because okay. So why is it so hard to run the correct route? So many reasons. One, the trail isn't marked. Part of it is on an established trail, like you start out on a road, but then you go off-road. And it's not marked. There's no little strings tied on the tree, nothing. No flags, no piles of rocks, no signs. The run always begins on a Saturday, and it begins between midnight and noon. I'll come back to that. The official race map goes on display on Friday. So runners have to have their own maps and mark the route on their own maps. They are not allowed GPS or altimeters. They are only allowed an old-fashioned compass.
Just like I'm picturing, there's just people everywhere. They're in complete disarray. Passing people and going, oh my God, do they know something I don't know?
Well, when it starts out, they're all kind of going in they're all kind of together.
The soccer kid club.
And remember, sometimes it's in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
So when does the race start? Laz and Raw Dog determine the start time the year before, but they don't tell anybody. So 1 hour before the race starts, a conch shell is blown. They have the shell. Someone blows the shell.
These dudes are ridiculous. They plan this over beer,
yes,
and whiskey,
and people do it from all over the world. At the appointed time, the race begins when Laz lights a cigarette. 100-mile races, they're called century races. They're not that unusual. I mean, I'm not running them. Everybody who knows me now is laughing hysterically. Of course you're not. But this one runs through mountainous terrain. And this is there's so many fucked up things about this. So I kept going downstairs going, and now you know what else they do? There's 12,000 feet of elevation gain in every loop. But there's gain and
that's
loss.
Intense.
Yes, that's 60,000 feet of elevation climbed and descended for the total race, which one person pointed out is like climbing Mount Everest twice. I did not check those numbers. I don't know anything about Mount Everest. In addition to no markings, there are no aid stations along the trail. There are 2 water drops where the water is set out in gallon jugs.
Yeah.
There's a whole show them setting them out in little lines. So guess what? If the temperature is below freezing, the water will be frozen.
Great.
So runners try to carry as much water as they'll need, and they kind of count that water drop as a bonus, not a certainty, if it's cold. Because they're like, well, fuck that. They are not allowed to receive any aid except from other runners while on the course. Whenever someone drops out and comes back to camp, here's the other thing. If you drop out, you have to get your own ass back to camp. One person was saying, okay, nobody drop out. I want everybody to win. But if you do drop out, try to drop out near a trail.
Yeah.
Oh, whenever someone does drop out and comes back to camp, a bugler plays taps. And there are some people who run up after any number of loops and they slap the yellow gate and say, play taps. And one guy cried. I'm sure a lot of people cry because I would be exhausted after running 20 or 26 miles. So while they're at the camp between loops, they can do whatever they want. They can eat, they can drink, change their socks, take a nap. Most of them don't nap. They do all eat because they're like, one of them. Yeah. One of them said he had on like a Fitbit. And he goes, yeah, this says I burned 7,000 calories. Yeah. So I need to get at least 1,000 into me.
I assume they all finished this lighter than when they started.
Yeah. The runners who have dropped out often hang around till the end and will help the people who are still in the race. So like the one guy, they're like, you need a banana. I got water. I got soup. I got whatever. One guy, he was like, oh, fuck, all my socks are wet. And they're like, somebody else, I got socks for you. So here's a trigger warning.
Because it's not really a competition. They're competing against themselves to try and conquer this. So yeah, it would totally be something they'd work together.
I do want to give out a trigger warning in case you decide you want to watch the documentary. And it's very amusing. It's very interesting because I'm like, why are you doing this? They included, so at this point, Joe walks into the room because I'm watching it on my computer.
Runners have like that diarrhea thing they get. How much of that happens?
It wasn't.
I'm curious about that.
Didn't see that. So I turned. It's running, and I'm letting it run because they're focusing on one of the runners who's in camp in between his loops. And I turn and I'm talking to Joe. Blah blah blah. Oh my god. Blah blah blah. I turn back around to look at the screen, and it's a close up of puncturing someone's blister.
Oh, okay.
That is vomit worthy.
There's going to be bloody nipples. There's going to be so many blisters.
And I was just like, why did they need to include a close-up of somebody doing that for somebody else? Because there was a whole debate of whether they should pop the blisters or not. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I would have done just as well with just the description. I didn't.
Yeah.
Remember the prison that James Earl Ray escaped from?
Yeah.
This year, the year of the documentary, thank you. It was part of the route. There's a stream that runs up next to the prison and runs under, and there's a tunnel. There's been a tunnel built that stream runs through, and they had to run through the tunnel. And one guy is going, and they're still using that prison, so there's guards everywhere with guns, and you're just like, hi, running the race. Bye. One guy, and he was doing a voiceover because he was talking about why he did the race. They didn't ask everybody, but he was just like, people always say we have this kind of American ideal. You work your whole life and you save up your money and then you retire and you travel and you do stuff and you have fun. And his father did that and he died a year before he retired.
Right. My dad died before he retired. They had their plans.
Yes.
They didn't do jack shit. They had a billion fucking kids. And then he got ALS.
Yep.
So that's very much on my mind.
So this guy was like, if there's something I want to do, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to travel. I'm going to try stuff. This is also the guy who he's walking through that tunnel and he just laid down because it was a hot day, and he just lays down in the water for a couple minutes, backpack on, the whole thing, and then he gets up and continues on. Some of the features of the course have been named. Not every feature is in the race every year. There's one called Testicles Spectacle, and it's because I don't know why it's named this, but it's the only spot where you can see the whole hill. Mm-hmm. Everything else is around a corner and up and down. They are scaling cliffs. If you
look up with people with jogging shorts on, it is a testicle spectacle.
That's true. There's one called the Rat's Head, which is loaded with briars, and they're talking about how the vines get as big around as your thumb, and the briars are like, the stickers are an inch long, and there are so many close-ups of bloody legs. So and I will say everybody was wearing everything you've ever seen. Some people look like they just got up this morning and put on a pair of cargo shorts and ran in them, and I'm like, but do you? But my God, the chafing you would get from a pair of cargo shorts. So hardly anybody had those little shorty running shorts on, but they had like compression shorts on or long tights. And so, yeah, oh my God, those briars were... One of the women who ran it came out and she looked down at her legs and she goes, well, I guess I won't be wearing a dress for a little while. Yeah. I'm like, eek. So... that was, I want to say, like 2012-ish is when the documentary was made. But the race has been run this year, and there was actually an article in the New York Times about Laz and about the race. He is almost 70, and he has a whole bunch of medical issues to deal with right now. Graves' disease, circulatory in one of his legs. He has toenail issues, which a lot of runners do. And... in the last few months, this just killed me. He lost both his mom and his dog. I'm like, holy shit. There's been some controversy around the race. Of course there is. Some runners are saying it's too hard. He says it's not. Obviously, like you said, he's not outrunning it. He hikes the course and he designs the spots where the books are going to be. I think this year was the first time he didn't place all the books. He wasn't physically able to go out along the course. His goal was to build a race that was challenging, that was ultimately challenging, but that people could finish. Not everybody can finish, but that some people could finish. He says designing an unwinnable race would be too easy.
Okay. He kind of has in some ways.
There was trouble in the last few years on social media because a photo was posted of a runner wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. He didn't oppose the sentiment. He didn't have any problem with
political
the picture.
Statements in this race.
He said there was a whole bunch of hateful racism being spewed in the comments.
Gosh.
He actually called it, I think he called it white supremacy bullshit.
Oh, good. I like him.
Yes. And he took the picture down because that's where it was going. It was devolving. Mm-hmm. So it's already been run for this year. 3 people finished, which is a big year. I think it's only been one or two other years that 3 people finished. And the last time was 2012. Since the race began, the 5-loop total has been completed 21 times by 17 runners.
So a couple people have done it more than once, or one person has done it more than twice.
So one person has done it 3 times. Wow. A couple of people have done it twice. One of the guys who finished this year, he ran 5 loops last year, but he was disqualified because it's grueling. It's physically grueling. And he began to hallucinate, and he got off the track, and he was in the town of Petra. Is that what I said it was? Petros. And people were calling the police. There's this insane man running around, and he's scaring people. So the police recognize him they don't know him personally, because it's actually one of the entrants from another country. But they recognize that he's one of the runners of this crazy ass race. So they bundle him into the police car and take him back to the finish line. So obviously when you get a ride to the finish line, but he did finish this year. He came back and he finished this year. And it's the first, and I will point out, the first person who ever finished the 100-mile race was a Brit.
Okay.
There was a guy, a special forces guy running it, and he was like, I did nothing in the Army that was this hard.
I mean, it definitely sounds like a challenge, but it's fun and it's different. It's different from all the other things they're running.
Yes. And it's just kind of nutty.
Chaos.
Yes. We're going to blow a conch shell.
And getting in has nothing to do with whether you're a runner, whether you've won other races. It has to do with how you answer these ridiculous questions.
Now, I did read in the New York... Now, I read through... I skimmed through a whole bunch of articles. The New York Times one, I think, did say that they will look at runners. They do want people who they think have a reasonable shot of completing the race. So they're not going to pick somebody who started running yesterday. Mm-hmm. They do try to weight it toward people who they know have run 100 miles or.
All right. So they're looking at that in addition to asking, how much did this person entertain me in their answers?
Yes. But yeah, what was it? What's going to be the
19th element?
I was like, who knows that? And then I thought, Veronica knows that. Mm-hmm. Of all the people I know, Veronica probably does know that. Yeah. So my sources for this are my cousin, Hal Partlow, Wikipedia. Now, the documentary is called The Barkley Marathons, The Race That Eats Its Young, which I love that title. And the New York Times article by Jared Beasley, which was in their online edition yesterday. And I think they said it'll be in the print, which I don't know what the hell date this is going to air. It will be in the print. It's online or it's in the print edition March 20th or 21st
April 12th.
of this year. Yes. So, yeah, it was such madness and such organized, orchestrated madness.
I mean, the last guy sounds like quite the character. To have thought this up in the first place, especially what it was based on, which really, it's so much longer than what he could have done. Of course, if you're escaping something, then maybe you can get further.
Well, there were, I guess, 5 or 6 people who escaped. There was a little group that escaped at the same time. It wasn't just him. And apparently a bunch of them went straight up the mountain. And I'm like, are you from here? Are you a mountaineer? Do you know shit? Because if not, what the fuck are you doing? The dogs found him. He had laid down and covered himself with leaves.
Like, I'm tired.
I'm dead now. But yeah, these people, it was so, it was fun to watch because you see the people, and obviously they had people out on the trail, camera people out on the trail at different points because you have footage of them climbing up different points. One article I found online, I didn't quote from it, so I didn't source it, but it had Laz posted. He said, I don't know if he sent an email or posted it on Facebook or where, but it was when they were laying out that year's trail. He's like, holy shit. He hired guides, local guides. He's been in these woods for years and years and years. He said they took him places in this park he never knew existed. And they didn't use maps. They said, we want to start here and we want to come out here. And the guides would go, I guess it was 2 guys. The guides would go, all right. And they would take off and come out exactly where they wanted to. And they took him on a shortcut to take him back to where they came in. And he said he learned more about the history of the area from those 2 guides than he had learned hiking in the area over the last 20 years. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, he was talking about, he wouldn't post pictures because he didn't want people to have any idea of the layout ahead of time. I'm like, I get challenging yourself. I do. You have to challenge yourself to go bigger or bolder or longer or harder. But this is just fucking crazy.
If I were a runner, I would probably totally apply for it. But I'm not. I like to go on a nice, well-paced hike. That's about where I am there.
Yeah. And I don't want to climb a cliff.
Yeah, I usually don't want to.
No.
If I do, there's some nice little ones in there that I do. I'm not going to do some rock climbing. Anyway, this is hellaciously long. So,
okay. Well, then we will not chat more now.
That's right.
All right.
I'll say good day to you.
And we will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.